Have you ever walked into a room, a high-stakes boardroom, a crowded social gathering, or an important negotiation, desperately armed with the perfect outfit, the meticulously rehearsed speech, and the burning desire to be respected, only to feel your entire presence evaporate into thin air the exact moment you cross the threshold? You speak, but your words seem to lack physical weight. You try to project confidence, but deep inside your stomach, a frantic electric anxiety is burning a hole through your biology. You find yourself talking too fast, laughing too quickly at other people's jokes, and aggressively over-explaining yourself just to secure a microscopic fraction of their attention. You leave the interaction feeling profoundly exhausted, invisible, and humiliated, wondering why certain rare individuals can command absolute, terrifying silence simply by walking through a door, while you have to scream just to be heard. You believe you lack charisma. You believe you are fundamentally uninteresting. Listen to me with absolute, unshakable clarity. Your invisibility is not a defect in your personality, and your exhaustion is not a lack of worth. You are failing because you have been conditioned by a deeply sick, chaotic society to operate your physical vessel using the exact wrong biological machinery. You are walking onto the battlefield completely hijacked by your sympathetic nervous system, the ancient primitive circuitry of fight, flight, or freeze. Your body is heavily flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. You are not entering the room as a sovereign king or an untouchable master. Your nervous system is entering the room as a panicked, frantic prey animal desperately trying to prove to the predators that it should not be eaten. Today, we are going to permanently rewire this biological flaw. I will reveal the 4 absolute laws of biological anchoring. I will teach you the ancient Shaolin mechanics of activating your parasympathetic nervous system, allowing you to use the terrifying physics of limbic resonance to completely subjugate the chaotic energy of any room without uttering a single word. But listen to me with deep, chilling reverence. The 4th law is the absolute brutal frontier, where an estimated 99% of people completely crumble and fail. It is the sacrificial fire where you must violently burn alive your most desperate, pathetic addiction, the need to exist for other people. If you are truly ready to drop the exhausting illusion of the performer, step out of the frantic matrix of social approval, and become an unshakable gravitational force of nature. Walk with me now. Settle your physical body. Anchor the soles of your feet heavily into the earth beneath you. Lower your center of gravity. Relax the rigid muscles in your jaw and let the desperate, buzzing frequencies of the modern world fall completely silent. To forge the dense, impenetrable presence of the sovereign mind, we must first completely dismantle the toxic, exhausting lie that the modern world has taught you about power. We must understand the tragic illusion of the false king. Look at the corporate world. Look at modern social dynamics. You have been aggressively conditioned to believe that dominance is loud. You have been taught that the most powerful person in the room is the one who speaks the most, the one who gestures wildly, the one who violently interrupts others to assert their dominance, and the one who physically inflates their chest like a threatened animal trying to appear larger. Society rewards the loudest voice and mistakes it for leadership. Let us examine the absolute, cold neurobiology of this behavior. When a human being feels the desperate, burning need to dominate a conversation, to talk over others, or to aggressively prove their intellectual superiority, what is actually happening inside their bloodstream? Their heart rate is dangerously elevated. Their breathing is shallow, frantic, and trapped entirely in the upper chest. Their brain is furiously pumping cortisol and adrenaline through their veins. They are operating entirely within the sympathetic nervous system. Despite the arrogant mask they wear on their face, their biology is screaming a different reality. They are absolutely terrified. In the natural world, true apex predators do not behave this way. If you observe a massive lion resting in the tall grass of the savannah, it does not roar frantically at every single gazelle that walks by to prove it is a lion. It does not pace nervously, trying to command the attention of the flock. It lies in absolute, heavy, terrifying stillness. Its power is entirely self-evident. It requires no marketing. The only animal that barks aggressively at the fence, jumping and baring its teeth at every passing shadow, is the deeply insecure, fearful dog who knows it is trapped. The aggressive noise is not a display of power. It is the ultimate, undeniable biological signature of fear. When you walk into a room and you immediately begin to broadcast your achievements, when you try to force people to look at you by being the loudest voice, or when you nervously fill every single gap of silence with useless, rapid chatter, the primitive, unconscious brains of the people around you are actively reading your biological data. Human beings are highly evolved, predatory social animals. Our nervous systems are constantly, silently scanning the environment for threats and weaknesses. Even if your words are incredibly articulate, even if your suit is incredibly expensive, their amygdala is instantly sensing your elevated heart rate. It is registering the frantic, erratic micro-expressions on your face. It is feeling the desperate, vibrating frequency of your sympathetic nervous system. And their unconscious mind instantly categorizes you. This person is seeking my approval. This person is desperate. This person is weak. The tragedy of the false king is not merely that they are perceived as weak by the subconscious mind of the room. It is the catastrophic, devastating toll this performance takes on their own physical vessel. Operating perpetually in the sympathetic nervous system is a biological emergency state. It was designed by evolution to save you from a physical predator, meant to last only a few agonizing minutes. When you force your body to sustain this high-octane, pressurized state of anxiety for a 3-hour meeting or an entire evening at a social event, you are actively burning your vital organs. Your digestion completely stops. Your immune system is violently suppressed. The muscles in your neck and your shoulders become rigid, hoarding heavy, stagnant energy that eventually rots into chronic pain and deep spiritual exhaustion. You are setting your own house on fire simply to provide a few minutes of warmth for strangers who do not even care about your existence. True power, the terrifying magnetic sovereignty that we cultivate in the quiet stone courtyards of the Shaolin temple, is the exact opposite of this frantic display. True power is the absolute, unapologetic absence of the need to prove you have it. It is the profound biological realization that the most dangerous, lethal force in any room is never the loudest storm. It is the unmovable mountain that the storm is forced to break against. You have realized the devastating, exhausting illusion of the false king. You have recognized that when you enter a room rapidly, speaking loudly, and trying to force people to look at you, you are merely broadcasting the frantic, desperate biological signature of your own fear. Your sympathetic nervous system is actively betraying you to the deep unconscious minds of the people around you. You are exhausted because you are burning your vital life force to power a performance that nobody actually respects. To stop this catastrophic leakage of energy, and to become the undeniable, terrifying center of gravity in any environment, you must learn the physical, mechanical architecture of true power. This brings us to the second law of biological anchoring, the awakening of the mountain and the absolute mastery of your parasympathetic nervous system. In the ancient, disciplined courtyards of the Shaolin temple, we do not train our bodies simply to throw punches or execute high kicks. The foundation of all true martial power, the absolute prerequisite for existing as a sovereign master in a chaotic world, is the cultivation of the Dantian. The Dantian is the physical, energetic center of gravity located deep within the lower abdomen, approximately 2 inches below the navel. For the vast majority of the modern human population, this center is completely, tragically empty. All of their vital energy, all of their panic, and all of their chaotic thoughts are trapped entirely in their heads and their upper chests. They walk through the world like an inverted pyramid, top-heavy, anxious, and incredibly easy to tip over with the slightest push of criticism or the smallest breeze of social pressure. To dominate a room without speaking a single word, you must violently reverse this pathetic architecture. You must empty your head and completely fill your abdomen. You must build the unshakable base of the mountain. The absolute, undeniable bridge between your frantic, racing mind and the heavy, stone-like presence of the mountain is the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in your body, running directly from your brainstem through your chest and deep into your digestive system. It is the master switch of your parasympathetic nervous system, the biological state of rest and digest, of profound safety, and of glacial, untouchable calmness. You cannot simply think your way into this state. You cannot stand outside a heavy boardroom door and repeat positive affirmations to yourself while your heart is pounding at 100 beats per minute. You must physically, mechanically, force the switch. Before you ever place your hand on the doorknob, before you ever cross the threshold into the chaotic, high-stakes environment, you must stop completely. You anchor your physical feet into the solid earth. You must feel the literal, undeniable gravity pulling the heavy weight of your bones downward. You must consciously, ruthlessly drop your shoulders. The tension you are holding in your neck is the physical armor of the prey animal expecting to be bitten. You must take off the armor. You relax the microscopic muscles around your eyes and in your jaw, assuming a facial expression of absolute, chilling neutrality. And then, you take total dictatorial control of your respiration. You must completely eradicate the shallow, frantic chest breathing of the sympathetic nervous system. You draw the oxygen slowly and heavily through your nose, pulling it all the way down into the deep, dark cavern of your lower abdomen, the dantian. You feel your stomach physically expand against your belt. You hold that dense, heavy breath for a single, terrifying second in the absolute silence of your core. And then you exhale, pushing the air out slowly, deliberately, as if you are blowing through a tiny straw, releasing every single ounce of frantic, nervous energy down into the floor. You do this 3 times. You physically force your heart rate to plummet. You mechanically command the vagus nerve to flood your bloodstream with the heavy, tranquilizing chemicals of absolute safety. When you finally open the door and walk into the room, you are no longer the inverted pyramid. You are the mountain. You do not rush inside, scanning the room desperately for a friendly face to cling to. You do not smile nervously at people who are not even looking at you. You walk with a slow, deliberate, heavy cadence. Every single step is a calculated transfer of absolute physical weight. You occupy the physical space not with an inflated, arrogant ego, but with the dense, undeniable mass of a human being who is entirely, utterly present in their own biology. If someone looks at you, you do not instantly avert your eyes in submissive fear, and you do not stare them down with aggressive challenge. You simply meet their gaze with the heavy, unblinking, calm observation of an apex predator at absolute rest. Your eyes communicate a devastating, unspoken truth to their primitive brain. I am perfectly safe here. I require absolutely nothing from you. I am already full. Do you understand the profound, terrifying impact this physical density has on a room full of chaotic, anxious people? When you sit down at the table, you do not lean forward aggressively, invading their space to make a point. You sit back heavily into your chair. You let the silence hang in the air around you like a thick, impenetrable fog. You let the other people in the room burn their vital energy by talking too fast, interrupting each other, and desperately trying to prove their intelligence. You simply watch them. You become the absolute silent void that absorbs their frantic noise. And because your parasympathetic nervous system is fully engaged, because your heart rate is glacial and your breathing is deep, you are no longer reacting to the room. The room is about to react to you. You are about to deploy the most devastating, invisible weapon in human psychology. You are now the mountain. Your heart rate is a slow, methodical, heavy drumbeat. Your breath is anchored deep within the dark, silent cavern of your dantian. You have stepped into the chaotic, high-stakes room, and instead of pushing your energy outward in a desperate, exhausting plea for attention, you have completely collapsed your energy inward. You have become a massive, undeniable black hole of parasympathetic gravity. You are no longer reacting to the frantic weather of the environment. You are the solid earth upon which the weather is forced to break. Now, we must observe the devastating, invisible physics of what happens to the people around you. This brings us to the third law of biological anchoring, the terrifying, undeniable reality of entrainment and limbic resonance. In the 17th century, the scientific world discovered a profound, unavoidable phenomenon in the mechanical universe. If you place dozens of pendulum clocks on a single wooden wall, and you start them all at completely different, chaotic times, a terrifying synchronization will eventually occur. You do not need to touch the clocks. You do not need to intervene. The largest, heaviest pendulum clock on the wall, the one with the most dense, unmovable, and grounded kinetic rhythm, will begin to transfer its microscopic vibrations through the wood. One by one, the smaller, frantic clocks will inevitably yield. Their chaotic ticking will slow down, speed up, and adjust until every single pendulum in the room is swinging in perfect, absolute unison with the master clock. This is the law of entrainment. The most massive rhythmic force in any interconnected system will always, without exception, subjugate the weaker, erratic frequencies. You must deeply internalize that a room full of human beings is not a collection of isolated, independent minds. It is a single, interconnected biological wall, and your nervous systems are the pendulums. Neuroscience defines this invisible connection as limbic resonance. Your brain is not a closed circuit. It is a highly sensitive, open-loop receiver that is constantly, unconsciously scanning the physiological data of the people around you. We are biological tuning forks. When you stand next to a deeply anxious, panicking human being, your own heart rate begins to involuntarily accelerate. Your chest tightens. Their sympathetic nervous system is aggressively vibrating the air, attempting to force your biology to match their chaos. In every social dynamic, the collective group unconsciously seeks a biological anchor. They are constantly looking for the heaviest, most regulated nervous system to dictate the emotional reality of the room. When 10 anxious people are in a meeting, the air is thin, electric, and suffocating. The moment you walk in, exuding the thick, heavy, glacial frequency of the parasympathetic state, you become the master clock. But what happens when the chaotic, frantic energy of an unmastered human being intentionally crashes into your heavy, parasympathetic density? A silent, invisible, and absolute biological war takes place in the physical space between you. And the law of entrainment dictates that the heaviest, most deeply anchored frequency will always swallow the lighter one. Imagine you are sitting at a negotiation table or engaging in a difficult confrontation. The person across from you is the classic false king. They are speaking rapidly. Their voice is loud. They are throwing aggressive, provocative statements at you, leaning across the table, desperately trying to pull you into their sympathetic storm. The unmastered mind, driven by the fragile ego, would instantly take the bait. The unmastered mind would raise its own voice, speed up its own breathing, and clash kinetic force against kinetic force, resulting in mutual exhaustion. But you are the mountain. You do not match their frequency. You do not enter their storm. You deploy the absolute terrifying power of the parasympathetic void. As they speak, you actively, consciously slow your breathing down even further. You sink your physical weight heavier into your chair, feeling the undeniable gravity of the earth supporting your bones. You let your eyelids relax. You look at them with the calm, detached, unblinking gaze of a stone statue. You do not nod your head frantically to show them you are listening. You do not make small, submissive noises of agreement to validate their aggression. You offer them absolutely zero physical or vocal friction. In the Shaolin philosophy, this is the profound power of the ocean. When a violent, chaotic river crashes into the deep, bottomless ocean, the ocean does not speed up. It absorbs the kinetic violence, dilutes it in its massive, crushing depth, and forces the river to become perfectly still. Within moments, the unconscious brain of the aggressor registers a catastrophic biological failure. Their mirror neurons, desperately seeking a reflection of their own anxiety to validate their anger, find only a cold,
unmovable void. Their primitive limbic system realizes that it is expending a massive amount of vital energy while you're expending absolutely none.
The biological dissonance becomes incredibly uncomfortable for them. And then, the inescapable physics of entrainment take over. Because your parasympathetic frequency is infinitely heavier and more grounded than their frantic sympathetic noise, their biology will begin to involuntarily submit to yours. You will watch this submission happen in real time. Without you speaking a single syllable to defend yourself, they will suddenly take a deep, involuntary breath. Their frantic, aggressive hand gestures will slowly stop. The sharp pitch of their voice will drop into a lower, calmer register. They will physically lean back in their chair, unconsciously retreating from the invisible, crushing weight of your presence. Their heart rate will literally begin to synchronize with the slow, heavy, methodical drumbeat of your own chest. You have just reached inside their biology and turned down the volume of their entire nervous system. You have dominated their mind, their body, and their behavior. And you have not sacrificed a single ounce of your own vital life force to do it. You have subjugated the predator through the sheer, undeniable gravity of your rest. You have become the master clock, forcing the chaotic pendulums of the world to swing to the heavy, silent rhythm of your own peace. You have mapped the frantic, exhausting illusion of the sympathetic nervous system. You have built the heavy, unshakable physical architecture of the mountain by anchoring your breath deep into the dantian and forcing the vagus nerve to flood your biology with absolute peace. You have stepped into the room, and you have deployed the terrifying, undeniable physics of entrainment, watching the chaotic, anxious pendulums of the people around you involuntarily submit to the massive gravitational density of your silence. You have dominated the environment without speaking a single syllable. But possessing this magnificent, terrifying power is entirely useless if you do not possess the psychological discipline to hold it. And this is exactly where the ultimate, most tragic failure occurs. Maintaining this heavy, silent power requires you to endure a level of internal psychological pressure that will absolutely shatter a fragile, people-pleasing ego. We must now step into the execution chamber. We must face the fourth, final, and most deadly law of the sovereign mind. We must assassinate the deeply addictive, pathological need for social validation. Why do an estimated 99% of people completely fail at this final frontier? Why do so many individuals successfully build this parasympathetic energy, walk into the room with absolute sovereignty, command the physical space, and then, less than 5 minutes later, completely and violently destroy their own empire? They fail because the sheer gravity of their silence inevitably attracts the heavy, burning spotlight of the room's attention. When you become the master clock, people will unconsciously stop what they are doing and look at you. The room will grow quiet, the chaotic noise will settle, and suddenly, you are standing at the absolute epicenter of a massive, heavy, echoing silence. For the unmastered ego, this silence is not a throne. It is a terrifying, suffocating prison. Listen to the dark, undeniable neurobiology of your own insecurity. Since you were a young child, your primitive brain was programmed with a singular, desperate evolutionary directive. You must be accepted by the tribe, or you will die in the wilderness. When the heavy silence of the room descends upon you, and the eyes of the group are locked onto your physical vessel, your ego panics. It interprets the silence as a profound social threat. It screams at you. They are judging you. You are making them uncomfortable. Do something to prove you are friendly. Perform for them. And so the vast majority of people surrender to the terror. They cannot bear the immense, crushing weight of their own silent presence. They crack. In a desperate, pathetic attempt to relieve the psychological tension in the room, they sabotage their own mountain. They suddenly let out a high-pitched, nervous laugh. They start talking rapidly about the weather, or they enthusiastically agree with a point they do not actually believe in, just to break the ice. They begin to over-explain their presence, smiling desperately, searching the eyes of the strangers around them for a microscopic crumb of validation. In that exact, devastating millisecond, the heavy iron anchor is violently ripped out of the earth. The massive, impenetrable mountain crumbles into a pile of cheap, scattered dust. The vagus nerve deactivates, the sympathetic nervous system violently reboots, and you instantly transition from the apex sovereign of the room back into the pathetic, exhausted prey animal, begging not to be eaten. You have handed the throne entirely back to the chaos, simply because you were too afraid to sit in the quiet dark, to become psychologically lethal. To hold the parasympathetic power indefinitely, you must perform a violent, unapologetic execution of the social performer. You must absolutely eradicate the desperate, pathetic need to be universally liked. You must embrace the terrifying, magnificent discipline of becoming the comfortable epicenter of other people's deep discomfort. When you walk into the room and your heavy silence causes the frantic people around you to squirm, to look away, or to visibly struggle with the tension, you do not throw them a lifeline. You are not a court jester. You are not an emotional janitor hired to clean up the chaotic anxiety of unmastered adults. If your dense, grounded peace makes their frantic egos uncomfortable, let them be uncomfortable. Let them drown in the silence. Their inability to sit quietly with themselves is their own biological disease, and it is absolutely not your responsibility to cure it by playing the role of the dancing monkey. The mountain does not apologize to the wind for refusing to move. The ocean does not apologize to the frantic river for swallowing its kinetic energy. You must sit heavily in your chair, maintain the glacial rhythm of your breathing, and look at the chaotic room with absolute, unbothered indifference. You must realize that true, undeniable charisma is not the ability to entertain a room. It is the terrifying ability to be completely, utterly content with absolutely nothing happening. When the moment finally arrives for you to speak, you do not speak like a victim rushing to fill a quota. When a question is directed at you, you do not answer immediately. You let the question hang in the air. You hold the silence for 2 full, agonizing seconds. You draw a slow, deep breath into the dantian. You let their anticipation peak to the absolute breaking point. And when you finally open your mouth, you speak slower than your anxiety wants you to. You use fewer words than you think are necessary. You deliver the cold, heavy truth, and you drop it onto the table like a lead weight. And most importantly, when you finish your sentence, you close your mouth and you lock your jaw. You do not add a nervous "right" at the end of your statement. You do not ask, "Does that make sense?" to desperately seek their approval of your intellect. You state your reality, and you let the heavy, echoing silence follow your words, forcing them to absorb the massive impact of your presence. When you no longer need the room to validate your existence, when you are no longer terrified of the awkward silence, you become the most magnetic, dangerous force in the environment. People will be biologically drawn to you precisely because you are the only human being in the room who is not frantically pulling at their energy. You become the sanctuary of the void. I know the agonizing, bone-deep exhaustion you have been carrying inside your cellular structure for all these years. I know the profound, quiet tragedy of spending your entire life acting as a hyper-vigilant performer on a stage you never even wanted to be on. You have burned your precious, irreplaceable life force, desperately trying to manage the emotional weather of every room you entered. You wore heavy, suffocating masks. You laughed at jokes that were not funny. You shrank your own massive potential just to make fragile, toxic people feel comfortable around you. You left 1,000 rooms feeling empty, hollowed out, and invisible, believing that you just needed to speak louder next time. But the era of the frantic performer is now officially, permanently dead. The biological hemorrhage has been stopped. You now possess the ancient, heavy architecture of the untouchable mind. You understand the pathetic illusion of the sympathetic storm. You have mastered the mechanical descent into the dantian, engaging the heavy iron anchor of the vagus nerve. You wield the devastating, undeniable physics of limbic resonance, forcing the chaotic world to synchronize to your glacial peace. And you have ruthlessly executed the disease of social validation, proving that your sovereign silence is infinitely more powerful than their desperate noise. The stages of the world are already built for tomorrow. The high-stakes rooms, the chaotic negotiations, and the frantic social theaters are actively waiting for you to walk through the door. Tomorrow morning, when you cross that threshold and the heavy, anxious eyes of the world demand your submissive performance, what will you do? Will you obediently start dancing to their frantic, exhausting music until your biology completely breaks? Or will you drop the heavy iron anchor into the earth, become the massive, unmovable mountain, and force the entire ocean of their chaos to become perfectly still? The choice is yours. The path is open. Amituofo.